Hello there, this is Solagbade. This is another edition of my Farm CEO newsletter, and this time around I'm showcasing the story I found very interesting of a teacher who became an egg farmer during the coronavirus lockdown. And if you've been following my work for some time, those of you who have been with me for several years, you know that I've always preached the importance of overhauling the conventional schooling system so that we can have people that are actually getting education that is useful for them in the real world. For instance, the need to incorporate vocational skills-based education into the normal academic schooling system, so that when children are getting academically, or what they call knowledge-based education, they can also have skills, income generating skills, passed on to them by the time they leave school, so that even if they don't get jobs through the conventional system, through the traditional mode of employment, then they can become self-employed. And you would have seen what I published recently on my website. If you haven't, check in the description links for this video. You'll see the link to the report about the new bill that's been passed by the Nigerian House of Reps, where they've made it compulsory for vocational skills-based education to be undergone by all children in secondary schools from year 1 to the final year. Anyway, that was just an intro, just to give you an idea of where this is coming from. My interest in showcasing these teacher stories because it's an example of how we need to practice what we preach. Most of the teachers in the schools of our kids, in many cases, are just depending on salaries. They have no other skills outside of their salaries. All right, no other skills they can use to earn income outside of their salaries. As a result, what happened to many of them in the private sector during the lockdown was that, they had no means to sustain their families, and many of them had to depend on contributions from, the rest of society. So now we're asking teachers to put their money where their mouths are. Right now, the story of this gentleman, he's a South African teacher. It's actually an agriculture teacher. I'm not very good. You will forgive me if you're from South Africa if I don't pronounce this right. Untompe Mashamat is the name of this teacher. Now, during the lockdown, he was forced to revisit. This is somebody who apparently he's always had the entrepreneurial bug, the passion for running a business. He had tried out his hands in the business, selling fast foods from his home in 2018, but he failed, mainly because he realized later on, having started it, that he could not combine it with his normal 9 to 5 job as a teacher, because there was just not enough time to attend to the needs of the business in terms of both creating the products and also delivering to the customers. So he had bought, as you can imagine, equipment to do this kind of business, like a generator, chips cutters, popcorn machine, chips fryers, and he had a mobile kitchen as well, but he just couldn't make out the time to do the business right, so he had to shut it down. That was in 2018. So when the pandemic happened in 2020, he realized that he needed to find a way to sustain himself. All right, so even though other people's businesses were kind of, as you can imagine, many people during the lockdown, their businesses shut down. I have several clients who shut down as well, including those that are running farm businesses. So it's a funny thing, different strokes for different folks, because in the case of in Tompe, he actually decided to sell off some of the equipment he had purchased for his fast food business and invest the money in starting a what we could call a micro poultry layer farm business. All right, so he basically went and used the backyard in his parents' home. As you see that, I want to quickly point out the fact that, okay, so he went to his parents' home, so he didn't have to go and buy a piece of land. So the people who might make a case that, if you don't have a piece of land of your own, then how do you start? Sometimes you may want to kind of talk with people who are sympathetic to your cause, or who share in your vision. They may be your parents, they may be relatives, they may be anybody, they may be friends, and you ask them to take a look at what you're trying to do and see if they can buy into it. Maybe sometimes they just want to lend a helping hand by giving you space in their own maybe on their own property, which is what happened with his parents. He was able to get them to do that for him, and he placed his egg layers there. So he bought them already close to egg laying most likely points of late. It wasn't specified in the write-up. The websites that I'll put a link in the description as well for the website for you to read the full article, actually, the full story, the way it was told on the website I'm consulting. All right, but basically what he did was then to put the layers there, about 200 laying birds. Okay, and he then began to nurture them. Okay, now he mentioned that he developed a love for agriculture because of a teacher he had. Again, you see how the relationship between going to school, learning, and then deciding on a career path. So in this case, this gentleman, at least what he was doing in real life was related to what he studied in school. That's not the case for many of us. Some people I know who are my clients today are actually lawyers. Some of them are practicing professionals in completely different fields like engineering, and they run farms, So, and I tell people all the time, why are these people starting these side businesses? Why don't they just focus and do the things they train in school to do, or that they're doing as kind of as professional means of earning income? Why are they venturing into farming? Because in many cases, people actually went into areas of study that they had no passion for, probably because the parents put them under that pressure, or because they just wanted to get into the university and get out, and then they finished and discovered that, oh, this is where my heart is, and then they decide to go into agriculture, and eventually over time they phase out their involvement in the other vocation, and then move fully into agriculture or into the farming business they've started up. All right, so anyway, that was just something that I wanted to throw in there to kind of remind everybody that sometimes it's best to just go directly into your passion and develop your interest in it, so that it grows and it flourishes and you can become successful, and not have to kind of live two lives in which you first of all waste several years of your life before you now find your feet and find your path. It doesn't make any sense. It's happening to a lot of people now, and it's needless suffering in many cases. All right, back to the story. This gentleman began to, as you can imagine, the birds were laying, and they are laying. He's still doing the business till today, and he was asked for advice for farmers, and he said, well, one of the things he would tell people is you better start small so you can scale up as time goes on, because it's not easy to run a large poultry enterprise, and it can be quite challenging in terms of unexpected developments. For instance, we have the issue of all kinds of diseases that can afflict a flock of birds. The normal one, the Newcastle, the avian influenza, which is a bit of a devastating one, and then you have the Gumboro, which can happen. So many things can happen, but of course, the Gumboro happens to birds that are younger. In this case, he got points of labor, so that they are out of that stage where they can be affected by it. But the point to be made is that whatever batch of birds, whatever age you choose to pick up your birds at, you need to be familiar with what the dangers are in terms of disease outbreaks that can occur, and make sure you take the necessary precautions by way of vaccinations and all that, and treatments. One of the things I found very significant that I want to point out that this gentleman did, this is what it falls under, what I call indigenous knowledge systems. This gentleman shared a powerful indigenous knowledge idea that has to do with having to protect the birds or prevent the birds from developing disease. He talked about the fact that aloe vera, this is a crop, a plant that so many people, we so underrated. It's such an underrated plant. I've found that it's so useful to so many things. All right, it has multiple health benefits for human beings as well as other kinds of living organisms. And it turns out, according to this gentleman from South Africa, that this aloe vera, he says, because I have never heard of anybody doing it here in Nigeria, or indeed any other parts of West Africa. So this is new for me. He says they're drinking water mixed with aloe vera, all right, for a week. All right. So every month, he said, I'm going to quote him here. He said, a lot of people don't realize that aloe vera is an antibiotic, especially on chickens. Every month, my chickens drink water that has been mixed with aloe vera for a week. On other days, I use, now this is something I would have to research and find out more about. So he uses that to protect them from bacteria, because an antibiotic. And he says that this is something that has enabled him to save a lot of money. So when you're starting small, it's not easy and it's not going to be pocket friendly to engage a vet to do all the conventional vaccinations, to provide all the conventional vaccinations and treatments for your birds, particularly when you're working with a small budget. So what are the alternatives? These are the things I tell people all the time about how you can reduce your variable cost. All right, variable cost reduction ideas. You can look at alternatives to the conventional systems that you're supposed to use. So if you're supposed to use drinkers that are made from aluminum and you have to purchase them and they're expensive, what are the alternatives you have? So there are lots of ideas about alternatives you can use till you're able to get your feet, get your business up and running, and then you have enough income to finance your purchase of more conventional and more inputs that you're going to use in your running your business. And I think it's important that people keep this in mind at all times, so that when you are saying, I want to do so and so thing, you don't shoot yourself in the foot and kind of frustrate yourself into giving up by thinking only of the ideal way that you can actually start up. Sometimes you can look at alternatives, you can look at improvising in order to start, and that's what this example here that this South African gentleman adopted illustrates. So I think it's just an exciting story for me to see how this guy started. You can see the photos they have shown of him on his farm and interacting with his birds and taking care of them. Of course, it's not big, but the idea is that he started, he's gained a lot of experience, and this experience will kind of serve him very well when he decides to scale up. Most importantly, because it's already generating income now, it's something that can enable him to attract potential investors, whether through family and friends, or even by approaching a bank or some other finance house or a cooperative of farmers. He can actually take it to the next level. But most importantly, he has actually started his journey. Unlike some other person who might be saying, I need to have XYZ, and I need to have everything in place before I start. This gentleman has actually taken the bull by the horns. He has actually stepped out and started. And then from now on, basically the sky will be his limit potentially. All right, so I hope you found this useful. I thought this story was something that could inspire you. And I'm going to be doing more things like this now, where I look for case studies, examples of people who have chosen to venture into farm business, but are doing it in a manner that allows them to proceed at a rate that does not make them have to risk major financial setbacks by doing it. So they start small and then gradually scale up in a manner that is manageable until they're able to achieve the level of output that they want commercially.